Okay, we were in Peah in the first parak. Let's go from the fourth Mishnah. Klal amru b'Peah. They said a rule of what crops are obligated in Peah. So we have a few requirements.
What chapter are we in?
First chapter.
So,
Klal amru b'Peah, a general rule by Peah. Kol shu eichel, anything that is food. V'nishmar, and people guard it. They make a field of it and take care of it. V'gedulei min haaretz, and it grows from the ground. And it's harvested all at one time. And it's stored for some term, long term. Chayav b'Peah, those types of crops are all obligated in Peah. And grain and legumes are going to be classic examples of these types of crops. They have all these characteristics. Ube'ilan, and by trees, ha'oig, sumac, v'ha'charubim, and carobs, v'ha'agozim, and walnuts, v'ha'shkedim, and almonds, v'ha'gefanim, and grapes, v'rimainim, and pomegranates, v'ha'zeisim, and aloes, v'tamarim, and dates are also all going to be examples of fruits that are chayavim b'Peah because they have all these characteristics. Okay. Let's say one did not give Peah when they should have and leave it in the field. So then Mishnah Vav says, La'olam hu naisim mishum Peah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So if you have one sumac tree, it's not a grove. It's just one.
Right. So one tree, presumably, the second and third prakim are going to deal with the definition of field.
Okay.
But presumably one tree would still have Peah. You'd have to leave like one. You can't leave a whole tree, but you leave one little bit of it, one branch or whatever it is.
Sure, thank you.
So Peah can be given at any point in time, or even though it's been clear, even though we didn't, you're supposed to leave it in the field and not harvest it. If you did harvest it, so at whatever step, you'll leave a certain amount and say this is the Peah. Upater min ha'Maaser, and Peah in general is exempt from Maaser. So at any point you give it, the poor people that come and take it will not have to give a tenth of that to the Levium. Ad shiur, until you get to the point that you make a pile out of your grain, which is significant because in general that's the point in time when it's considered it goes from being a crop to being grain, to being tvua, and the pasuk says that the obligation to give Maaser is from grain. So once it becomes grain, so now there's an obligation to give Maaser on this pile. Once there's an obligation to give Maaser on the pile, I have to give the Maaser, and only then can I take off a portion and give it to as Peah, because again I can't give. I have this obligation that stops me from doing anything else with it of giving Maaser. Similarly, v'naisim mishum hefker. If I decide I can just make a part of my crop ownerless, I decide either it's not worth dealing with it, or I want to leave it for someone else who might need it, I could do that. Upater min ha'Maaser, and again I won't have to give Maaser on anything that I just decided to leave in the field. Ad shiur, until I get to the stage of making it into a pile of grain. Since at that point it already became obligated in Maaser, I would have to take off the Maaser before I could just allow anyone else who wants to take it, because that'd be like giving away things that would be like giving away the Maaser, which really I have an obligation to give to the Levium. Or you can feed it to your animals, whether they're domesticated animals or you can feed it to wild animals or birds. You can feed it to any animal, any type of animal. Upater min ha'Maaser, again on shiur. So if I have grain that's not fully processed yet, I can feed it to my animal. That's not a problem until you do miruach, because again, then there's an obligation to give Maaser from the grain. If I feed it to my animal, so then the animal's eating stuff that should have been given to the Levi. V'naitel min goren v'zaira, or I could take the grain and go plant it for next year. Upater min ha'Maaser. So with ad shiur, again the same idea. Before it becomes obligated in Maaser, Divrei Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Kiva says I could take it and plant it, and this one's is disputed because the Rabbanan are not so happy with it. They say no, Midrabanan, we don't want you doing that because this is like just a loophole that's too easy to get around Maaser. All your seed crop you're never going to get Maaser from, because there's no reason why you should process it so far if you're going to plant it anyway. kayin v'levi, a kayin or levi shalakhu es hagoren, if they buy someone else's crop, hamaiser shalahem, so they can keep the Maaser if they're right, because they're allowed to get Maasers from others, so they can keep their own Maaser. Ad shimriach, until it's already obligated in Maaser. So this, they explain, is we don't want to give the Levium a unfair economic advantage. Right? Everybody else is going to have to give away 10% of this produce. The Levi could keep it for himself, so he can undercut the market because he can afford to pay by 105% of what it's worth, and he'll still make a profit because he gets the extra 10%. So once there's a chiyuv Maaser, that the Rabbanan made a knas on a Levi who would buy such grain that he has to give the Maaser to somebody else, so he shouldn't have any unfair advantage. Or another application of the same idea is, or of the general idea here of hamakdish upaida, someone who he sanctifies his field. He says, "My field, I'm going to give to the Beis Hamikdash. They're going to sell it and make money," and then he goes and buys it back himself. So he just ended up giving hektish money. Chayav b'Maaser, so his field is the same field it was when he sold it, when he buys it back. So he has to give Maaser from the crop he'll harvest later. Ad she'imruach hagizbar, unless the gizbar, the person who's acting on behalf of hektish, harvested the field and piled up the grain. So hektish does not have an obligation to give Maaser. So if I would buy that processed grain back from hektish, I would not have to give Maaser either. Okay, and then I think we'll save the next Mishnah for tomorrow. But just now the first parak really is what is Peah, right? So we said it's the last bit of the field, or maybe not. It could be a little earlier, maybe, or it could be a little later. What things are Peah? We said, right, it's basically any crop that's harvested and stored up. The next two prakim are going to deal with a little bit more complicated of how do you define one field, right? What things split fields into two? What two things near each other would be joined for one, which is just significant for in how many places do I have to leave Peah? If I have two fields and there's a fence in the middle, so is that one field and I'll just leave Peah from whichever one I harvest second? Or is that two, and I'll have to leave the last bit of each side on either of the fence? So that's going to be the next few prakim going through that setting that up.